Hey guys, it's Multiplier. We're with Splice today, and we're going to be having a look at warping some more. And specifically, we're going to have a look at pseudo warp markers and some shortcuts that are really worth building into muscle memory. And it's worth noting that the entire project you'll see in front of you and lots of other examples will be included in a Splice project you'll be able to download from a link below. So check that out if you want some more examples and want to try some of these ideas out for yourself. So let's have a look at pseudo warp markers. So let's have a look at a drum loop, which is the best place to have a look. So I've got a simple drum loop. We'll just drag out into session view into one of the clip slots. So we have a drum loop here from one of my sample packs called Space Effects. But what is this grey thing that I have been overlooking? So these are the pseudo warp markers. And the cool thing with these is these are where Ableton's predicted there's going to be a useful spot to put a warp marker. So typically they put these pseudo warp markers at the start of new sounds and specifically transient. So in the case of drum loops, the transient is the front bit of that sound, that really spiky bit at the front. So Ableton has gotten quite good now, especially in the latest versions of Ableton, at predicting the start of drum sounds, which saves you having to manually insert the right spot for them. So let's say we wanted to move about, for example, move this point here. So you see how we have this drum sound here, which isn't on the grid. Let's say we wanted to put it exactly there. So it says 1.3.2. Let's say for whatever reason we wanted to put that drum sound exactly there. So we've got a few ways to do it. We can either double click, which will insert the warp marker and then drag it to there, which moves it nice and easily. But if we undo, we got a few other things we can do. So if say for example, this pseudo warp marker isn't exactly where we want. So if we zoom in, it's pretty much exactly where we want. But let's say, for sake of argument, we want to move it back a little bit. What we can do, we can hold down Shift and then drag, and then we can drag this pseudo warp marker wherever we like. So especially in the older versions of Ableton, it wasn't that good at finding the start of drum sounds. So you were constantly zooming in. You were finding these pseudo warp markers, which you can always spot. So see how these little arrows? You can always spot all these little arrows, little arrow. These are where the pseudo warp markers go. You could get your mouse right over it, hold down Shift, and just move it to the start of the sound. And then once it's there, you can double click and then drag it to wherever you want it to be dragged to. And there's another trick using pseudo warp markers that's worth knowing, which is really useful when you're warping entire tracks with a BPM, but you don't quite know what a BPM is. So let's drag out Voices, that track we warped in the previous video, and we'll show you some other cool techniques. So we'll drag it out. We will hit the warp button. We will first of all need to set the position of the very first beat of the entire track. We've got two ways we can do this. So we could either use the technique that we've just discovered, which is we can zoom right in, we can move this pseudo warp marker to be exactly where we want. So we'll hover, hold Shift and drag it to the start, double click, zoom back out, double click the first warp marker and drag this warp marker to the start. That's one way of doing it. The other way, which is quite cool, which is really not very obvious, is in this particular case, what we can do when we only have this one warp marker, if we zoom right in, so we can see the transients nice and clearly, if we hover our mouse over this first warp marker that Ableton's already put at the start of the first beat, hold Shift, and now drag left, see how as we're dragging now, it's dragging the entire track, but leaving the warp marker exactly where it is. So that's just by holding Shift, so we can line it up just like that. There's personal preference which ones you use, but it's really worth building all these into muscle memory, just so you're really, really quick. And when you want to get these ideas down, you're not feeling held back by lots of technicalities. So we've got our first beat of the track in. What's this other cool technique? So what we can do is, if we don't know the actual BPM of the track, but we do know that it's going to be a fixed BPM, what we need to do is we need to figure out how long a looped section is. So we will play this through. We can see that this transient here is the start of a new loop section. So what we need to do is we need to zoom in, find that transient. So we will zoom right in to maybe say around here. That warp marker is in a good enough position. And then we will hover our mouse over that pseudo warp marker, and then we will simply click and drag. So we haven't actually inserted a warp marker, but we're just clicking and dragging it to the start of the third bar. And now what it's done is, because we know that first section was looped and we play it through, we can check using our ears and the timing of the bars to see if that looks about right. And we can see that based on what's happening in the track, that looks like it's pretty much right. And then the final step is to see what this segment BPM says. So this segment BPM says 140.06. So we know that the actual BPM of the track is going to be 140 because we got it pretty much spot on. And producers, especially me, would never use a weird BPM like 0.06. So what we need to do is click that first beat and just set it to exactly 140. And there you go, another cool little trick. And that was simply clicking a warp marker and dragging it around using some common sense. But yeah, that's a little bit about pseudo warp markers and some shortcuts that are really worth building into muscle memory. It's worth checking out the Splice project file if you want some more examples and some things to try yourself. I've been Multiplier, hope you enjoyed.